Well, you've got your first bass boat and you're all excited. Today we're going to talk about the basics of driving a bass boat. Bass boats are very different than other types of boats in the water. One, they have a low draft. Their hulls are a little bit different than a deep V. And there's some things about driving a bass boat, especially if you haven't owned one before, that I want to go over today so you just have a lot of success your first time out there on the water. And I remember the very first time I sat behind a really high dollar bass boat, I was a little bit intimidated. And I had many people share with me different tips over the years and show me how to drive and do different things. So I want to pass it on to you today. First thing is first, make sure that you got that life jacket on when you are driving a boat and have that kill switch connected. This literally could not only save your own life, but somebody else's life. So make sure that you have that connected every single time that you operate the boat. So let's go ahead and get started into it. And like I said, this is going to be a very basics video for people that are first time boat owners, those first times driving behind a boat. So we're going to cover just the real basics. First off, this is going to be your throttle and or gear shift, depending on the boat that you own. This may be the only thing that you've got, or if you've got a bigger, fancier bass boat, you could have what they call a hot foot, very similar to an accelerator pedal that would be down on the floor. That's going to be your throttle, and then this would only be the gear shift. On this particular aluminum boat that I'm running today, this is both my gear shift and throttle. This is the trim control. Some boats have got the trim control up on the column, and then this here is my release to go ahead and put it into forward, neutral, and reverse. So most of my operation is going to be done right here, and like as I said, you've got the trim up here on the column, or you've got the hot foot down below, but the basics and the ideas of what we're going to talk about are all the same. Next thing, let's talk about how do we get this boat up and running up on pad. Well, the first thing that you want to do is when you start your boat, go ahead and leave it idle for a little bit. You got to let it get all of that stuff lubricated in there. You just don't want to turn it on and slam it down to 6,500 RPMs right away. Want to make sure to go ahead and leave it run just a little bit. Now, as you're coming away from, you get it off the trailer and you're in the marina, or the boat ramp, or you're in a no-wake zone, a highly congested area, you're going to want to be able to be as maneuverable as possible. And to do that, you want to have your boat trimmed so that prop is going straight out. You don't want the motor tucked underneath, especially if you're going in reverse. When I have it trimmed properly, as you can see, this is very maneuverable. I can maneuver around in a tight area just fine. If you have that motor tucked too much up underneath, it's going to be blasting all that water up into the hull of the boat, and your maneuverability is going to go way down. So that is definitely the first thing as you're coming away from the boat ramp, is make sure that your motor is pretty much straight up and down and that prop is going out the back. You're going to find it the easiest to maneuver that boat. Now, what about we want to get it up on pad? That is the first time that we're going to be using our trim function. So as I get this boat on pad, got a lot of wind out here today. Let me go ahead and turn it around. So I'm going to go ahead and run it this direction. And to get it up on pad, I want to trim the motor down and get it so it's what they call tucked up underneath the hull, and that's going to give me my maximum lift, okay, and get it up on pad quickly. Now, once I get up on pad, I'm going to want to trim the motor so it comes back, and that prop, the energy from that prop is pushing straight out the back of the boat. So I'm facing the way I want to go. I'm going to go ahead and trim that motor down now, and you trim it until you hear it bottom out. It is bottomed out. Now I'm going to go ahead and put it up on pad and throttle it down. And then once you feel the boat lift, you can go ahead and trim it up. And then most of the hull is out of the water, and you can just feel it. It's not laboring, it's just operating very nicely. Now when I want to come down off a pad, keep it in forward. Sometimes I see people slam it right into neutral, and you don't want to do that. You want to keep it in forward, come down nice and easy, Then once you're all the way down, you can go ahead and put it into neutral and turn the boat off if you wish. But if you just slam it right down into neutral, a lot of times you're going to get just a huge amount of backwash over the backside of the boat and create all kinds of a mess. So keep it in forward and come down nice and easily. Now, with that said, I know it sounds obvious, but a bass boat doesn't have a braking system. You've got to let the friction between the water and the hull of the boat slow you down. So definitely keep that in mind as you're driving your boat and you're coming into an area maybe where there's a lot of traffic, or you're coming into a no-wake zone, is there's no brake system. Okay, so you've got to account for that and the inertia that that boat is going to have. It's still going to travel a ways. Now, with that said, as you're coming up to a dock, let's say you want to park this boat on the dock and then go get your truck and trailer, as soon as you put it into neutral and you lose that forward propulsion, it is very difficult to maneuver and control the boat. So you want to keep it in gear, even when you're idling, keep it in gear as long as you can, and you will be able to steer just fine. As soon as you put it into neutral, that steering goes away, and then your motor more becomes just a rudder. However you are going, you can kind of rudder it a little bit, but I see that mistake quite often as people coming up to a boat dock will put it in neutral too soon, and then they lose control, and if you're dealing with current and a lot of wind, that can just be a huge mess. Now, as far as I just touched real basically on the trim here, I do have another video that goes into detail on how to trim a boat, so you can go ahead and check that one out, and I'll put the link down below. But let's talk about chop and waves on the water and driving a boat. If you've got small chop on the water like we do today, or small boat wakes, it is best to go ahead and trim the motor down a little bit and bring that hull down, and it will push right through them. A very steady and stable ride. If you start to get some big waves out there, you get some big boat wakes that surprise you, you don't want to spear the wave. You don't want to have the wave and the bow of the boat spear into it. Can cause a lot of damage, not to mention you're going to be sitting here waist high in a whole bunch of water. So if you have a little bit larger waves out there that you're dealing with, that's when you want to trim it so the bow comes up a little bit. Okay, so trim it up so that motor is pushing the motor, trim it up, and that prop is going to push that back end down, and that bow comes up a little bit, and that will help you cut through those bigger waves. But the key is you're going to want to slow down. You don't want to hit them too fast. If you've got monster waves out there, you get caught unexpectedly in a storm where you got big 4-foot waves, 5-foot waves, that's totally different. That's very advanced boat handling. You're going to want to do diagonals, tack back and forth, but we could get into that into another video. Hopefully you're not out on the water in that type of a situation. But basically, smaller waves, trim it down, that hull is going to cut right through it. You get some bigger waves, trim it up where you bring the bow up a little bit, and it's going to cut through them nicely, but make sure you slow down a little bit. You can cause a lot of damage to your rig if you're pounding into the boat wakes too hard. Now, I should mention when you're driving down the lake, and if you need to go into a sharp turn or a 90-degree turn, you may need to trim that motor back down a little bit to maintain bite. If you're in the middle of your turn and you feel your wheels slip, the motor is trimmed up too much. If you just trim it down a little bit, you're going to come through that turn just fine. Another question that I get asked often as I travel around the country is people will come up to me and say, Steve, my boat just doesn't feel right. It's like it's laboring. Something is not right. Well, one, you could have a mismatched prop on there. That's a possibility. Maybe especially if you bought a used boat, I would take it to your dealer and they can straighten that out for you. But often the cause is you have the boat loaded incorrectly. You have too much gear in there, you're overloaded, or you're balanced not correctly. So you have way too much gear up in the front or over to one side, whatever it might be. So if the boat just doesn't feel like it's operating smoothly and correctly to you, that is the first thing I would do, is check how much weight that you have in there, and then make sure that your weight is distributed properly between up towards the front and the back, and try to balance it out the best that you can. Now, hey, if you're just in the market for buying a bass boat, why don't you go ahead and check out this video right here. I think it will really help you out. and help you make the right purchase for you and your family. And don't forget to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.